The old Chevy pickup truck sputtered to a stop, its engine finally surrendering before the ghost of a gas station. The faded sign hung crookedly from a rusted pole. Vance's service station, its once bright American Star logo now yellowed against the vast Montana sky. For the broken veteran Samuel Sam Vance, this ruin was the final insult in a life defined by loss. But the German shepherd beside him, a creature he never wanted, wasn't looking at the decay. Max's gaze was fixed intense on a single spot on the ground, as if he could see straight through the cracked concrete to the $200 million secret that would not only change his life, but could also get him killed. The silence of the Montana plains pressed in around them, broken only by the whisper of wind through the tall grass. Sam's weathered hands gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles white with tension. At 65, his tall frame still carried the rigid posture of his 30 years in the Army Rangers, though now pain accompanied every movement, some physical, most not. "Well, Max," he said, his voice a gravel road worn by years of command and whiskey, "welcome to our inheritance." The dog's ears perked up at the sound of his name, but his dark, intelligent eyes remained fixed on that same spot of concrete, a low wine building in his throat. The third glass of whiskey burned no less than the first. It was a familiar fire, a welcome punishment that scorched the memories hiding in the dark corners of his mind. Sam sat in the deepening twilight of the cramped apartment above the gas station, the amber liquid glowing in the single beam of a street lamp that cut through the dusty window. He was a man in his 60s, but his face carried the rugged, weary topography of someone much older. His silver hair was cut short out of habit, military discipline, ingrained so deeply that even in solitude he maintained standards. His blue eyes, once sharp and commanding, now held the distant gaze of a man who had seen too much of the world's darkest corners. A faded photograph sat on the table before him. Two soldiers in desert fatigues grinned at the camera arms slung over each other's shoulders. The harsh Afghan sun cast them in a halo of golden light. Sam and Ryan, before the IED, before the silence, before the guilt, became a constant, suffocating weight. Sam raised his glass to the smiling face in the picture. To absent friends, he murmured a toast he'd made 1,000 times before. The whiskey did its job, blurring the edge of the memory just enough to make it bearable. The sudden shrill ring of his phone was a violent intrusion. He ignored it. It rang again, persistent, demanding. With a sigh that tasted of regret and cheap liquor, he snatched it from the counter. The screen read Davies and Associates, the family lawyer. "Vance?" He answered, his voice a low rumble. "Mr. Samuel Vance." The voice on the other end was clipped, professional, devoid of warmth. It belonged to Mr. Davies, a man whose entire existence seemed to be contained within gray suits and leather-bound folders. "I am calling with some unfortunate news. It's regarding your father, Colonel Grant Vance. I'm sorry to inform you that he passed away peacefully this morning." Sam said nothing. Peacefully. It was a word he could never associate with his father. A man carved from granite and duty, a man whose presence had been a rigid, unyielding force in the background of his life. A stranger who shared his last name. "The funeral is a private affair on Thursday," Mr. Davies continued into the silence. "The reading of the will shall take place at my office on Friday at 10 a.m. Your children have been informed. Please be punctual." The line clicked dead before Sam could form a reply. He lowered the phone, staring at his own reflection in the dark screen. Unfortunate news. It didn't feel like anything at all, just an empty space where a distant, powerful star had finally burned out. He looked at the photograph again, at Ryan's easy smile, at his own younger face still capable of hope. For a moment he saw another face, his father's stern countenance, never proud, always expecting more. Colonel Grant Vance, war hero, perfect soldier, and a father who had remained a mystery to his son. Sam's hand reached for the whiskey bottle again, but a soft sound made him pause. Max had padded silently into the room and now stood watching him, his dark eyes reflecting a wisdom that seemed impossible for an animal. Without breaking his gaze, Max crossed the room and laid his heavy head on Sam's knee. The simple gesture of companionship caught Sam off guard. He hesitated, then placed his hand on the dog's head, feeling the warmth of life beneath his palm. "He's gone, Max," Sam said quietly. "Not that he was ever really here." 2 days later, Sam stood in the cold, sterile conference room of Davies and Associates. He had chosen his attire with a kind of defiant indifference. A faded flannel shirt under an old leather jacket, worn jeans, and scuffed military-issue boots. The American flag pin on his lapel was his only concession to formality, a reminder of the oath he had taken long ago. He was a stark contrast to his children, who sat across the polished mahogany table like figures from a luxury magazine. Caleb, his son, was the picture of success at 40. He was a tech entrepreneur with a sharp, tailored suit that probably cost more than Sam's monthly military pension. His dark hair was perfectly styled, and his eyes, cold and assessing, darted constantly to the expensive watch on his wrist as if every second spent there was a calculated loss. Beside him sat Isabel, his daughter Elegance, personified in a cream-colored silk dress. At 40, she had built a name for herself as an art broker, a profession that allowed her to surround herself with beauty and cultivate an air of effortless sophistication. Her blonde hair was swept into a sophisticated knot, her gaze drifting over Sam, not with malice, but with a faint dismissive pity that was somehow worse. They had not spoken more than necessary since Catherine's funeral 5 years ago. His wife had been the bridge between them, and when cancer took her, that bridge collapsed, leaving Sam stranded on the shore of a previous generation, watching his children drift further away on the currents of a world he barely recognized. Davies, the lawyer, sat at the head of the table, a thin man in his late 60s. He cleared his throat and began reading from the document in a dry monotone. There were bequests to charities, provisions for former staff, and then the main inheritances. To my grandson, Caleb Vance, I leave a trust fund in the amount of $15 million, as well as my residence in Bozeman and my collection of military memorabilia. Caleb's face remained impassive, though a small, satisfied smile played at the corners of his mouth. To my granddaughter, Isabel Vance, I leave an equal trust fund of $15 million, as well as my condominium in Manhattan and my art collection. Isabel nodded slightly, as if this was exactly what she had expected. And to my son, Samuel Vance. Mr. Davies paused, adjusting his glasses. I leave the entirety of the property located in Oak Haven, Montana, including the business and all its contents. May he find purpose there. A heavy silence filled the room, broken by Caleb's short, incredulous laugh. Oak Haven. You mean that derelict gas station? That's what he gets. Caleb, please. Isabel placed a perfectly manicured hand on her brother's arm. She turned her pitying eyes to Sam. I'm sure grandfather had his reasons. It's a quiet place, simple. It's a pile of rubble in the middle of nowhere. Caleb scoffed, not even trying to hide his contempt. How fitting. At least you'll have a roof over your head, Dad, assuming it still has one. Sam's jaw tightened, but he remained silent. He stared at the wood grain on the table, feeling the familiar burn of shame and anger. They saw him as a failure, a broken soldier who couldn't adjust to civilian life, who had retreated into a bottle after 30 years of service, after Afghanistan, after losing Ryan, after losing Catherine. His father had apparently agreed. There is one final item, Mr. Davies said, looking over his spectacles. It is a personal, non-negotiable codicil. Colonel Vance's personal companion, Max, is to remain with the property under the sole care of Samuel Vance. Before Sam could process this, a paralegal opened the conference room door. Standing in the doorway, held by a simple leather leash, was the most magnificent animal Sam had ever seen. Max was a German shepherd, a prime example of the breed. He was a large, powerfully built dog, perhaps 5 or 6 years old, with a thick coat of sable gray and white. His posture was noble, his head held high, and his dark, intelligent eyes surveyed the room with a calm, unnerving intelligence. He did not bark or whine. He simply stood, a silent, dignified sentinel. A dog. What is Dad supposed to do with a dog? Caleb waved a dismissive hand. Isabel shuddered delicately. I hope it's house-trained. Max ignored them completely. His gaze settled on Sam, and for a long moment, man and dog simply looked at each other. There was no affection in the dog's eyes, but there was an intensity, a deep knowing quality that made Sam feel strangely exposed. He finally found his voice. I don't want a dog. The terms are absolute, Mr. Davies stated flatly, sliding a pen and a stack of papers across the table. Acceptance of the property includes acceptance of the dog. Sign here. Defeated, Sam took the pen. He saw Max not as a companion, but as another burden, a living, breathing piece of a past. He couldn't escape a final strange command from a father he had never truly known. He signed the documents, the scratch of the pen, the only sound in the room. Minutes later, he walked out of the building, the leather leash feeling heavy and foreign in his hand. Max walked beside him, his pace perfectly matching Sam's, his demeanor calm and observant. They reached Sam's old beat-up Chevy pickup truck, a relic from the early 2000s that had seen him through the worst years after his discharge. He opened the passenger door, and without a word of command, Max hopped in and sat on the worn bench seat, staring straight ahead through the windshield. Sam got in and started the engine. The silence in the cab was absolute. It was the silence of two strangers, a broken man and a stoic dog, bound together by the will of a ghost. They pulled out into traffic, heading west towards the distant mountains of Montana and an inheritance of rust dust and forgotten memories. The long drive from the city had been a silent, hours-long affair. Sam drove and Max sat a stoic passenger, staring out at the rolling plains and distant mountains of Montana. The interstate stretched before them like a ribbon of possibility dotted with the occasional truck stop and small town. American flags flew proudly above gas stations and diners, their red, white, and blue, a stark contrast against the golden wheat fields and endless blue sky. It was America at its most iconic, a landscape that had shaped generations of men like Sam, men who had answered their country's call without question. They arrived in Oak Haven as the sun began its descent, painting the vast sky in strokes of orange and purple. The town itself was little more than a whisper, a collection of tired buildings huddled along a two-lane highway. A feed store, a small diner, a hardware shop, and a post office, all clinging to existence in a changing world. And there at the very edge of town was his inheritance. The sign hanging crookedly from a rusted pole read, "Vance's Service Station." The paint peeling, and the once bright star in its logo faded to a jaundiced yellow. Two ancient fuel pumps stood like skeletal sentinels on a cracked concrete island. The small convenience store and attached garage had windows so layered with grime they were nearly opaque. It wasn't a pile of rubble as Caleb had suggested. It was worse. It was a tombstone marking a dead dream. Sam parked the truck, the engine's dying rumble, the only sound for miles. He sat for a moment, the weight of the place pressing down on him. This was it, the grand purpose his father had envisioned for him. A slow decay in the middle of nowhere. With a deep sigh, he got out. Max hopped down after him, his paws silent on the gravel. The dog's tail didn't wag, he simply stood beside Sam, his head up, his ears twitching as he took in the new surroundings with a quiet, alert intelligence. A key from the lawyer's envelope opened the door to the small apartment above the store. A wave of stale, dusty air washed over them. The furniture, what little there was draped in white sheets, creating the ghostly outlines of a lifelong abandon. Dust motes danced like frantic sprites in the final rays of sunlight, slanting through the dirty windows. For Sam, the suffocating silence and isolation felt horribly familiar. It was the same silence that filled his small rental back in the city, the same emptiness he tried to fill with liquor. His first instinct was a desperate clawing need. He rummaged through the kitchen cabinets, pushing aside ancient cans of food until he found what he was looking for. A half-full bottle of cheap whiskey left behind by his father. His hand shook slightly as he poured a generous amount into a dusty glass. He drank it down in one long, burning swallow, welcoming the familiar fire. He poured another and then a third, leaning against the counter as the alcohol began its slow, numbing work. Max had settled in a corner, watching him with those dark, unreadable eyes. As night fully claimed the sky, the silence in the apartment deepened, broken only by the mournful whistle of the wind outside. It was a sound that scraped at the edges of Sam's memory, pulling him back to the heat, the dust, the suffocating silence between moments of sheer terror. The memory hit him like a physical blow. He was in Kandahar, the sun a merciless hammer in the sky. He and Ryan were on patrol, the last leg of their tour. They walked with the easy, practiced rhythm of men who knew each other's thoughts. "First thing I'm going to do when I get back," Ryan said, his voice a cheerful beacon in the tense quiet, "I'm going to take Sarah to that little Italian place by the lake, the one with the checkered tablecloths. I'm going to eat a mountain of pasta and then I'm going to ask her to marry me." Sam had smiled, clapping his friend on the shoulder. "She'd be a fool to say no. She'd be a fool to say yes." Ryan laughed, "But I'm counting on her being a fool." They were brothers forged in the crucible of combat. Ryan was the light to Sam's shadow, the optimist who kept the darkness at bay. They moved forward, scanning the dusty road their rifles held at a low ready. The world was shades of brown and beige, a landscape of hidden dangers. And then it happened. There was no warning, just a blinding white flash that swallowed the world, followed a split second later by a deafening roar that felt like it had ripped the air from his lungs. The force of the blast threw Sam backwards, his helmet scraping against the rocky ground. His ears screamed with a high-pitched whine. Dust and smoke filled the air thick and choking. He scrambled to his feet, disoriented, his heart hammering against his ribs. "Ryan," he yelled, but his own voice was a muffled whisper in the ringing silence. "Ryan." He stumbled through the haze, his eyes stinging, his throat raw. He saw the crater first, a raw, ugly wound in the earth. And then he saw him, or what was left. The memory shattered. Sam gasped, finding himself back in the dusty kitchen in Montana, his knuckles white, as he gripped the edge of the counter. The ghost of Ryan's laughter echoed in the silent room. The pain was a fresh, bleeding wound. He needed more. He needed to drown it. He turned toward the counter, his hand reaching for the whiskey bottle, a desperate lifeline. As his fingers brushed against the glass, a low whine came from the corner of the room. He ignored it. He needed this. He deserved this punishment. He grabbed the bottle, but as he lifted it, a wet nose nudged his hand insistently. He looked down. Max was standing beside him, looking up, his head cocked to one side. "Get away, Sam mumbled, his voice thick. He tried to push the dog aside, but Max was persistent. Sam raised the bottle to pour, and a heavy paw came down firmly on his forearm. It wasn't an aggressive move. It was deliberate, calculated. The weight was just enough to stop his movement. Sam stared at the paw, then at the dog's face. He tried to shake his arm free, but Max held firm. With a growl of frustration, Sam set the bottle down and tried to reach around the dog, but Max was quicker. He shifted his body, physically blocking Sam from the bottle, a solid, furry wall of quiet defiance. He didn't growl or show his teeth. He simply stood his ground, his dark eyes locked on Sam's. In that moment, Sam saw something that stopped him cold. It wasn't the simple loyalty of a pet. It was an expression of profound, almost human understanding. It was a silent plea, a clear and undeniable message. "Don't stun." Sam backed away from the counter. He sank into one of the dusty chairs at the kitchen table, the craving for alcohol suddenly replaced by a wave of disbelief. He stared at the German shepherd, who now stood guard over the whiskey bottle like a sentinel. For the first time since the lawyer's office, Sam truly saw him. This wasn't just his father's dog. This was something else entirely. This was a guardian, and Sam was his mission. Sam woke to the pale light of a Montana dawn filtering through the grimy apartment window. His head throbbed with the dull ache of a phantom hangover, a ghost of the oblivion he had denied himself the night before. The first conscious thought that formed in his mind was clear and sharp, unclouded by alcohol. For the first time in months, he had chosen not to drink. He sat up, swinging his legs over the side of the dusty mattress. Across the room, the whiskey bottle stood on the counter exactly where he had left it, and lying on the floor between him and the bottle was Max, his head resting on his paws, but his dark, intelligent eyes were open and fixed on Sam. It was a silent, steady gaze, a reminder of the silent pact they had made. A gnawing hunger, another sensation long dulled by liquor, reminded him he needed food. The cans in the apartment looked ancient, their labels faded and peeling. He would have to brave the convenience store downstairs. He made his way down the creaking wooden steps, Max following a few paces behind his claws, making soft clicking sounds on the wood. The air in the store was thick with the smell of dust and decay. Sunlight struggled to pierce the grime on the windows, illuminating shelves stocked with sun-bleached boxes of cereal and faded bags of chips. It was a perfect time capsule of failure. As Sam scanned the shelves for anything remotely edible, he noticed Max wasn't with him. He turned and saw the German shepherd had moved with a quiet sense of purpose behind the main counter, a space cluttered with an old cash register and yellowed newspapers. The dog was sniffing intently at the floor, his tail held low and still. A low whine rumbled in his chest. "Max, come on. There's nothing back there," Sam called, his voice echoing slightly in the empty store. Max ignored him. His sniffing became more frantic. Then he began to scratch his powerful claws, scraping against the cracked linoleum floor. It wasn't a playful scratch. It was a determined, focused digging at one specific spot, a single discolored tile. Sam walked over, his boots crunching on unseen debris. "Hey, stop that!" He reached down to grab Max's collar, but the dog was relentless, letting out a short, sharp bark, his eyes darting from the tile to Sam's face and back again. The message was clear. "Look here." Sam sighed, a mixture of irritation and a flicker of something else. Curiosity. He had seen this kind of focus before in soldiers on a mission, in bomb-sniffing dogs trained to ignore all distractions. Max was not just playing. He knelt down, running his hand over the tile Max had been scratching. It felt different from the others. It was loose. He nudged it with his fingers, and it shifted slightly. His heart gave an unexpected thump. He looked at Max, who sat back on his haunches, watching him, a low, encouraging whine coming from deep in his throat. Okay, I see it," Sam muttered, more to the boss than to himself. He went into the attached garage, the air thick with the smell of old oil and rust. After a few minutes of searching, he found a worn-heavy pry bar. Back in the store, he wedged the tip of the bar into the seam of the loose tile. With a grunt of effort, he put his weight into it. The old adhesive groaned in protest, and then with a sharp crack, the tile popped free. Beneath it was not concrete, but a dark, hollow space, and nestled inside that space, resting on a bed of what looked like oilcloth, was a dark green metal footlocker. It was standard military issue, old but impeccably maintained, with stenciled lettering on the side that had been mostly scraped away. A cold prickle ran down Sam's spine. This was not something a simple gas station owner would have. He lifted the heavy box out of the hole. It was sealed with a heavy-duty padlock. He looked at Max, whose tail gave a single slow wag. "What did you find, boy?" Sam whispered. He carried the footlocker upstairs to the apartment and set it on the dusty kitchen table. The lock was too strong for the pry bar. With a grim determination, Sam went back to the garage and returned with a heavy hammer and a chisel. It was loud, brutal work, but after several sharp metallic blows, the shackle of the lock finally broke. He paused, his breath held. He lifted the lid. The air that escaped smelled of old paper, worn leather, and something else, something metallic and familiar. Inside, everything was packed with military precision. On top lay a small bundle of personal items. He carefully lifted them out. There was a pair of his father's old silver dog tags, a service medal he had never seen before, and a worn leather wallet. He opened the wallet. Inside was a single faded photograph of a young, smiling woman with kind eyes. His mother. She had died when he was a boy, and seeing her face here, kept so carefully by his stoic father, sent a pang of an emotion he couldn't name through his chest. Beneath the mementos was a heavy, ornate key. It was made of brass, tarnished with age, its head shaped like a complex gear. It was unlike any key he had ever seen. And at the very bottom of the locker was a standard-issue green hardbound logbook, a military journal. He lifted it out. It felt heavy, important. He opened it to the first page. It was not filled with his father's neat handwriting. Instead, the page was covered in dense, meticulous blocks of letters and numbers. A cipher. Sam stared at the page, a jolt running through him. The fog in his brain, the dull haze of alcohol and grief, began to burn away, replaced by the sharp electric focus of a soldier. He recognized the pattern. It was a variation of a substitution cipher he had been trained to use in the Rangers. Complex and difficult, but not impossible to break. For months, his only mission had been to drink himself into oblivion. He had failed at being a soldier, failed at being a civilian, failed his friend. But now, holding this journal, he felt the first stirrings of a new purpose, a new mission. He set the journal carefully on the table, placing the intricate brass key beside it. He looked across the room at the whiskey bottle, then down at Max, who had settled at his feet, watching him with unwavering loyalty. The thirst was still there, a dull ache in the back of his mind, but it was no longer a roar. It was a whisper, and for the first time he felt he had something loud enough to shout it down. The hunt for the truth had begun. For 3 days, the world outside the dusty windows of the gas station ceased to exist. Sam worked at the kitchen table a man possessed. The whiskey bottle remained untouched, a silent monument to a battle already won. His new fight was with the pages of his father's journal. He covered sheets of paper with grids and letter combinations, his mind once foggy with alcohol, now razor-sharp with the familiar, disciplined focus of a cryptographer. The cipher was complex, a layered system designed to be unbreakable, but Sam had been trained by the best. And slowly, painstakingly, the coded messages began to yield their secrets. He learned of clandestine meetings, coded transmissions, and shadowy figures who passed through this sleepy Montana town like ghosts. It was a language of espionage, of a secret war, fought in the quiet places of the world. He was so engrossed that he barely ate or slept. Through it all, Max was a constant, silent presence, either sleeping at his feet or watching him with a patient, steady gaze. On the evening of the third day, as Sam was close to a breakthrough on a particularly dense passage, Max stood up. He stretched his powerful frame and walked over to Sam, nudging his idle hand with a wet nose. "Not now, boy," Sam murmured, his eyes still glued to the journal. "Almost got it." Max whined a low, insistent sound. He nudged Sam's hand again, harder this time. When Sam still didn't respond, the dog turned and walked to the door leading downstairs, looking back over his shoulder. The message was unmistakable. "Follow me." With a sigh of resignation, Sam pushed his chair back. Maybe the dog needed out. He followed Max down the creaking stairs, not into the convenience store, but into the cavernous dark garage attached to it. The air was cold and smelled of rust and stale gasoline. Sam flicked a switch, and a single bare bulb flickered to life, casting long dancing shadows. Max paid no attention to the junk littering the garage. He trotted with purpose to the far wall, stopping in front of a large rusted metal panel covered with defunct switches and faded warning labels. It looked like an ancient electrical junction box, something that hadn't been touched in decades. Max stopped in front of it and began nudging one specific spot with his nose, a spot that looked like a simple hexagonal bolt head covered in rust. "What is it?" Sam asked, approaching cautiously. "You smell a rat in the wall," Max whined again, and nudged the bolt, his insistence unwavering. Sam knelt down for a closer look. He wiped away a layer of grime and rust from the bolt head. It wasn't a bolt. The hexagonal shape was too perfect to the metal beneath the rust, a strange, non-ferrous alloy. It was a facade. An image flashed in his mind. The heavy brass key from the footlocker, its head shaped like a complex gear. His heart began to pound a heavy, rhythmic beat against his ribs. He pulled the key from his pocket. He held it up to the disguised lock. The six-sided shape of the key's head was a perfect match for the hexagonal recess of the bolt. It was designed to fit seamlessly, invisibly. With a hand that trembled slightly, he inserted the key into the lock. It slid in with a smooth, satisfying click. He took a deep breath and turned it. There was no grinding of old metal. Instead, a soft, almost inaudible hiss of hydraulics broke the silence. The entire wall panel, the junction box, and a large section of the cinder block wall with it, began to retract inwards, sliding sideways without a sound. Where a solid wall had been moments before, there was now a dark opening. A clean, brushed stainless steel door stood in the recess, a stark contrast to the decay surrounding it. A small green light glowed above it. The door slid open, revealing a small, modern industrial elevator, its interior lit with a soft white light. Sam stared speechless. He looked down at Max, who looked back up at him, his tail giving a single confident thump against the concrete floor. This had been the dog's mission all along. "Okay, Max," Sam whispered, his voice hoarse. "Lead the way." He and Max stepped into the elevator. The door hissed shut, plunging them into a moment of perfect silence before the car began its descent. It moved with an impossible smoothness. No shuddering, no sound of cables. It went down and down, far deeper than any simple basement. When the doors opened again, Sam felt as though he had stepped into another world. He was in a large circular room, brightly lit and climate-controlled. The low, powerful hum of electronics filled the air. Banks of servers with blinking lights lined one wall. A central command console held multiple computer monitors, all dark for now. Another wall was covered in maps of the world, dotted with pins and notations. This was not a cellar. It was a high-tech underground command center. He took a hesitant step into the room, his boots feeling clumsy and loud on the pristine floor. The moment his foot crossed the threshold, a large screen on the far wall flickered to life. The face of his father, Colonel Grant Vance, appeared. He looked older than Sam remembered, the lines on his face deeper, but his eyes, a piercing blue, were sharp and alive. He was in his full-dress uniform, his expression not of a father, but of a commanding officer briefing a subordinate. "Samuel!" The colonel's voice filled the room, calm and direct. If you are watching this, then you have found your way, and my faith in you was not misplaced. Sam stood frozen, his throat tight. What you see around you, his father continued, is designated DIA Outpost 7. I have been its commander for 45 years. The gas station above is a cover, a perfect piece of Americana that no one would ever look at twice. My life here was a lie, son, but it was a lie in service to my country. The colonel explained everything, how he was recruited out of special forces into the Defense Intelligence Agency during the Cold War, how this facility was established as a secure communication hub and safe house for deep cover agents. He spoke of missions and risks with a detached professionalism that was chillingly familiar. A life of this nature, with its inherent risks, comes with a certain compensation. The colonel set his gaze unwavering. Through my service and through carefully managed investments, I have amassed a significant personal fortune. The total value of the assets I am leaving to you is approximately $200 million. The number hit Sam like a physical force. He staggered back a step, his mind reeling. 200 million. He thought of his cheap apartment, his beat-up truck, the constant grinding worry about money. I did not leave this to you out of pity, his father's image said, as if reading his mind. Caleb and Isabel are driven by greed and status. They would have squandered it or worse. I left it to you because you are a soldier. You were forged in the fire of the Rangers. You understand duty, sacrifice, and integrity in a way they never will. This is not just money, Samuel. It is a legacy, a weapon, and a tool. What you do with it now is your mission. The screen went dark. Sam stood in the humming silence of the bunker, the weight of his father's words, of his secret life of $200 million settling on his shoulders. He felt a profound, aching sense of loss for the father he never knew, and a terrifying sense of responsibility for the legacy he now held. He looked down at Max, who had sat patiently beside him the entire time. The dog looked up, nudged his hand with his nose, and for the first time Sam understood. Max wasn't a burden. He was a guide, a guardian of the secret, and now he was Sam's partner. The silence that followed his father's final words was absolute. Sam stood alone in the heart of the secret world his father had built. The low hum of the servers, a stark contrast to the screaming chaos in his own mind. $200 million, a DIA outpost, a 45-year double life. It was the plot of a spy novel, not the quiet, lonely history of his family. Sam took a tentative step towards the central command console, his reflection a ghostly figure in the dark screens. He ran a hand over the cool, smooth surface of a server rack. This was real. The solid steel beneath his fingers was real. He looked down at Max, who had remained by his side, a calm, grounding presence in the surreal environment. The dog seemed completely at home here, as if this secret bunker was as natural to him as the Montana wilderness above. Drawn by an instinct he didn't understand, Sam sat in the large leather chair at the main console. As he did, the primary monitor in front of him flickered to life, displaying a simple login prompt password. His father's words echoed in his mind. My faith in you was not misplaced. What would the password be? He tried his own birthday. Access denied. His mother's name. Access denied. Then he remembered the journal, the first entry he had managed to fully decrypt. It was a date the day his father had purchased this gas station. He typed in the numbers. Access granted. The screen opened to a simple, clean desktop. There was only one file icon, a text document labeled, Read Me First. With a trembling finger he opened it. It was a manual, a direct, concise guide written by his father. It detailed the bunker systems from the independent power generator to the encrypted satellite communications array. It was written in the clear, precise language of a military field guide. But as Sam read, he saw more than just technical specifications. He saw the sheer brilliance and discipline it took to maintain this facility for over 4 decades. He saw the meticulous notes on protocol, the contingency plans for every imaginable scenario. This was not the work of the cold, distant man he remembered. This was the work of a master strategist, a protector, a man who had carried an impossible weight alone. A quiet respect, something Sam hadn't felt for his father in years, began to bloom in his chest. The most critical section was titled Walk-in Protocols. It listed a series of seemingly innocuous phrases, challenge and password combinations for making contact with visiting agents. One line stood out to him, challenge, The stars are certainly bright in Oak Haven. Response. But the moon is always brighter over the mountains by Nowens. He spent what felt like hours exploring the system, each file he opened, revealing another layer of his father's secret life. He found logs of communications, financial records that detailed the growth of the fortune and risk assessments for operations he could barely comprehend. He felt a profound, aching connection to the father he had never truly known, a man who had sacrificed a normal life for a silent, thankless duty. A faint, jarring sound drifted down the elevator shaft, pulling him from his trance. It was the bell, the brass bell on the door of the convenience store upstairs. A customer. Adrenaline surged through him, hot and sharp. This was it, his first test. He quickly locked the console and stood, his heart hammering. Max was already on his feet, his ears perked, his body tense and alert. "Okay, boy," Sam whispered. "Let's go play shopkeeper." He and Max took the elevator up. Sam stepped behind the counter of the dusty store, his hands feeling clammy. He tried to look casual, as if he had been doing this his whole life. A moment later, a man in his mid-50s entered. He was completely unremarkable, dressed in the generic uniform of a tourist or traveling salesman, a faded blue windbreaker, khaki pants, and comfortable-looking shoes. He had thinning gray hair and a mild, pleasant face. He offered Sam a polite nod. "Afternoon," the man said, his voice neutral. He browsed the shelves for a moment before picking up a bottle of water. He brought it to the counter. Sam rang up the purchase, his fingers feeling clumsy on the keys of the old cash register. "That'll be $2, he said, his voice sounding rough to his own ears. The man handed him the money. As he waited for his change, he glanced out the window at the clear blue sky. "The stars are certainly bright in Oak Haven," he said casually, his eyes still on the horizon. The words hit Sam like a jolt of electricity. It was the challenge phrase. His mind raced. What was the response? The moon. The mountains. He fumbled for the words, his throat suddenly dry. "Yes," he stammered, his voice cracking slightly, "but the moon is always brighter over the mountains." He said it too loudly, the words sounding rehearsed and unnatural in the quiet store. The man's expression did not change, but Sam saw a flicker of acknowledgement in his eyes. He gave a single, almost imperceptible nod. He took his change and the bottle of water. "Thank you," he said, and then he turned and walked out his car, starting up and driving away a moment later. The encounter had lasted less than 60 seconds. Sam stood frozen behind the counter, the adrenaline slowly draining away, leaving him feeling shaky but strangely alive. It was real. The journal, the bunker, the mission. It was all real. For the first time since he had received his honorable discharge, Sam felt the weight of a true purpose settle on his shoulders. This was more than a gas station. It was a post, a watchtower, and he was the man on watch. The thought of protecting this legacy, of honoring the father he was just beginning to understand, became a powerful, unshakable resolve. He walked back upstairs to the apartment. He looked at the whiskey bottle still standing on the counter. He thought of the clarity he needed, the sharpness his father had trusted him to possess. The craving was still there, a ghost whispering in the back of his mind, but its voice was weak, drowned out by the call of duty. He picked up the bottle, walked to the sink, and twisted off the cap. Without hesitation, he poured the remaining amber liquid down the drain, the harsh smell of alcohol filling the air for a moment before it was gone. He looked at his reflection in the dim light of the window. The haunted, hollowed-out look that had stared back at him for years was gone. In its place was the steady, focused gaze of a soldier who had just been given his orders. Max came to his side, resting his heavy head against Sam's leg. The mission had begun. The first few weeks at the gas station passed in a haze of purposeful labor. Sobriety had returned a clarity to Sam's mind that he hadn't known in years. During the day, he worked to bring the station back from the dead. He cleared the junk from the garage, cleaned the grime from the windows, and even managed to get one of the old fuel pumps working again. The physical work was a balm, sweating out the toxins of his past and leaving him tired but satisfied at the end of each day. At night, he would descend to the bunker, a silent world of secrets, where he continued to decipher his father's life, learning the intricate dance of espionage and the responsibilities of his new post. This fragile peace was first shattered by the mail. A crisp, cream-colored envelope arrived from a prestigious law firm Sam had never heard of. Inside was a formal but generous offer from his children to purchase the Oak Haven property. He threw it away. A week later, another letter arrived, the offer significantly higher, the tone slightly more impatient. He threw that one away too. Then they sent their emissary. A sleek black sedan completely out of place in the rustic Montana landscape crunched to a halt on the gravel one afternoon. A man in an expensive gray suit and perfectly polished shoes stepped out. He was in his 40s with a smooth, practiced smile and the predatory eyes of a shark. "Mr. Vance," he said, extending a hand. "Howard Henderson with Big Sky Development." Sam wiped his greasy hands on a rag and ignored the handshake. Max, who had been lying in the shade of the garage, rose silently to his feet and stood beside Sam, his body language calm but unequivocally protective. Henderson's smile tightened. "Your children Caleb and Isabel contracted my firm to assess the potential of this land, and let me tell you, the potential is enormous. We're envisioning a luxury resort, a gateway to the mountains. We are prepared to make you a life-changing offer, Mr. Vance, enough to let you put all this behind you and start fresh." He gestured vaguely at the gas station at Sam's life, as if it were a mess to be cleaned up. "It's not for sale," Sam said, his voice level and firm. Henderson's smile faltered. "Perhaps you misunderstand the scale of the offer. We are talking 7 figures." "I understand perfectly," Sam replied, "and I'm not interested." He gave Max's head a reassuring pat. The developer's eyes flickered to the dog, who watched him without blinking. A low, almost inaudible rumble vibrated in Max's chest. "Very well," Henderson said, his tone turning crisp. "Your family will be in touch." He retreated to his car and sped away, leaving a cloud of dust in his wake. The call came that evening. He recognized Caleb's number and let it ring 3 times before answering, steeling himself. "Dad?" Caleb's voice was smooth-laced with a familiar, condescending warmth. "Isabel is here with me. We heard you met with Mr. Henderson. He said you were a bit uncooperative." "And the property isn't for sale, Caleb," Sam said simply. "Don't be a fool, Dad." Isabel's voice cut in sharp and impatient. "What are you even doing out there, laying at being a grease monkey? It's embarrassing. We're trying to give you and Out a chance to get your life together." "It is together," Sam said, the words feeling true for the first time in years. A humorless laugh crackled through the phone. "Together," Caleb repeated, "living in a ruin, talking to a dog. We're worried about you. Your judgment has been clouded for a long time. It would be a tragedy if you let this opportunity slip away because you're too stubborn or too unwell to see it." The veiled insult hit its mark, but Sam held his ground. "My answer is final." The silence that followed was heavy, and when Caleb spoke again, the fake warmth was gone, replaced by a cold, menacing calm. "All right, Dad. We tried to do this the easy way. Let me be very clear. You have a well-documented history of instability, a long and sordid relationship with the bottom of a bottle. A judge might take a very dim view of a man like that being in charge of a significant estate." Sam felt a cold knot tighten in his stomach. "It would be a terrible shame," Caleb continued, his voice like silk sliding over steel, "if we had to petition the court to have you declared mentally incompetent to manage your own affairs. We could be granted conservatorship to protect grandfather's legacy from your poor decisions. Think about it. All of this would be taken out of your hands, for your own good, of course." The cruelty of the threat was breathtaking. Caleb was using his darkest moments, his deepest shame, as a weapon against him. Sam felt a tremor in his hand, a phantom thirst, a wave of the old, familiar panic. "Is that a threat?" Sam asked, his voice barely a whisper. "It's a promise," Caleb said softly and hung up. Sam lowered the phone, his body trembling with a mixture of rage and fear. The confidence he had been building for weeks felt like a house of cards in a hurricane. Caleb was right. He was a recovering alcoholic. He did have a record of instability. They could destroy him. He sank into a chair, his head in his hands, the silent screams of his past roaring in his ears. He was weak. He was a failure. He couldn't do this. Then he felt a heavy weight on his knee. He looked up. Max had come to him, resting his massive head on his lap. The dog looked up at him, his dark eyes filled with a quiet, unwavering trust. There was no judgment in that gaze, no pity. There was only a simple, solid certainty. Max didn't see a broken man. He saw his partner, his commander. Sam buried his face in the thick fur of the dog's neck, breathing in his scent. He wrapped his arms around the powerful animal, anchoring himself to his calm, steady presence. Max was his shield. He was a living, breathing testament, to the fact that his father had trusted him, believed in him. Caleb and Isabel could see only his past failures, but his father, in this incredible dog, saw the soldier he still was. The trembling stopped. The fear receded, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. This was no longer a negotiation over land. This was a battle for his life, for his sanity, for his father's true legacy. They had drawn a line in the sand. He looked down at Max, who licked his hand gently. "They have no idea who they're dealing with, do they, boy?" Sam said, his voice steady once more. The vice of greed was tightening, but they were about to find out he was no longer made of something that could be so easily crushed. A week passed in tense silence after Caleb's threatening phone call. The letters and visits stopped. Sam knew this was not a retreat, but the quiet before a storm. He used the time to prepare. Every night he descended to the bunker to continue his work on the journal, but his focus had shifted. He was no longer just a historian of his father's patron. He was a soldier analyzing intelligence, searching for any clue, any name or location that might explain his children's desperation. During the day, he reinforced the old gas station checking locks, securing windows, and bringing a heavy steel tire iron from the garage up to the apartment. He was on watch. On a moonless Tuesday night, the storm arrived. Sam was in the small living room upstairs, reading by the light of a single lamp. Max was asleep at his feet, his powerful body occasionally twitching in a dream. The only sound was the gentle sigh of the wind outside. It was a peaceful scene, a fragile illusion of normality that was about to be shattered. Down below, a dark, unmarked van had parked a quarter-mile down the highway, its lights off. Two figures dressed head to toe in black emerged and moved towards the gas station with a silent, fluid efficiency that spoke of professional training. They bypassed the front door of the store, heading for the large rolling door of the attached garage. One man knelt, producing a set of tools. He worked on the lock with a surgeon's precision. The tumblers clicked almost inaudibly, but almost inaudible was not silent enough. At Sam's feet, Max's ears shot up. A deep, low growl, more a vibration than a sound, rumbled in his chest. His eyes snapped open, and the head that had been resting peacefully was now raised, alert, and focused on the floor. Sam froze, the book forgotten in his lap. He had spent years in the field learning to trust the instincts of highly trained animals. He placed a hand on Max's back, a silent command to wait, and listened. He heard nothing but the wind, but Max's body was coiled like a spring, every muscle tense. Then Sam heard it, a faint metallic scrape from the garage below. It was the sound of the lock giving way. He was out of his chair in a second, the tire iron in his hand. He moved to the top of the stairs, his heart pounding a steady, cold rhythm. Max was beside him, poised and ready, the low growl in his chest building in intensity. The garage door slid open with a soft, greasy whisper. Two dark silhouettes slipped inside. The moment they were in, Max exploded. The growl erupted into a ferocious, deafening bark that ripped through the night's silence. He launched himself down the stairs, a gray and white blur of righteous fury. Sam followed right behind him, his boots silent on the steps. He used the precious seconds Max had bought him to let his eyes adjust to the darkness below. He could see the two intruders, momentarily stunned by the sudden violent appearance of a 100-pound German shepherd. One of the men, a large, broad-shouldered figure, raised a pry bar, but Max was too fast. He lunged not at the weapon, but at the man's center of mass, hitting him hard in the chest and knocking him off balance. The man stumbled back with a grunt of pained surprise. The second intruder, a leaner, quicker man, turned his attention to Sam, who was now at the bottom of the stairs. The man pulled a long knife from his belt, its blade glinting in the faint moonlight coming through the open garage door. He moved forward, his movements confident and dangerous, but he was facing a ranger. Sam's training took over, a cold, lethal muscle memory that bypassed thought. As the man lunged, Sam sidestepped, using the man's own momentum against him. He brought the heavy tire iron down in a sharp, brutal arc, not on the man's head, but on his wrist. There was a sickening crunch of bone, and the knife clattered to the floor. The man screamed, clutching his shattered wrist. Sam didn't hesitate. He delivered a swift, disabling kick to the man's knee. The man collapsed, his scream turning into a guttural moan. Meanwhile, the first intruder had managed to shove Max away. He scrambled to his feet, his pry bar held like a weapon. He saw his partner on the ground and Sam turning towards him, the tire iron held ready. He made a quick calculation. He looked at the furious, snarling dog poised to lunge again, and at the silent, deadly figure of the man who had just taken down his partner in seconds. He made the smart choice. He turned and fled, disappearing into the darkness. His injured partner, clutching his broken arm and moaning in agony, trampled after him, dragging his bad leg. A moment later, Sam heard the sound of the van's engine roaring to life before it sped away into the night. Silence descended once more, broken only by Sam's ragged breathing and Max's low warning growls. The adrenaline began to fade, leaving a cold metallic taste in Sam's mouth. He knelt down, running a hand over Max's back. "Good boy," he said, his voice hoarse. "You saved us, boy." He found a small, shallow cut on Max's shoulder, likely from the pry bar, but the dog seemed otherwise unharmed. He stood and surveyed the scene. The intruder's professional tools lay scattered on the floor. They hadn't touched the old cash register. They had been making their way towards the small office at the back of the store, the place where his father would have kept his files. They weren't here for money. They were here for information. A chilling realization washed over him. This was not a simple family dispute over a real estate deal. No property, no matter how valuable, was worth this kind of risk, this level of professional violence. His children weren't just greedy, they were desperate. They were hunting for something they believed was hidden here, something they needed badly enough to hire dangerous men. He looked out through the open garage door into the vast, dark expanse of the Montana night. The physical threat had been repelled, but a much larger, more sinister danger now loomed. This was about more than a gas station. It was about what the gas station protected, and his children's frantic search for it had just turned this Cold War into a hot one. The day after the break-in was unnervingly quiet. Sam had cleaned up the mess, his movements methodical and detached, but his mind was a storm of suspicion. The professional nature of the intruders pointed to a level of desperation from his children that went far beyond a simple land dispute. They were afraid of something, and that fear had made them dangerous. He felt a constant prickling sense on the back of his neck, the feeling of being watched. Max seemed to feel it too. The dog never strayed far from his side, a silent gray shadow, his usual calm demeanor replaced by a quiet, hyper-alert vigilance. Around noon, a plain, dark gray sedan pulled up to the functioning fuel pump. A woman stepped out of the driver's side. She was in her early 50s with intelligent, discerning eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. Her salt and pepper hair was cut in a neat professional style, and she wore a practical charcoal pantsuit that was professional without being flashy. She looked more like a college professor or a mid-level government official than a typical Montana tourist. She did not reach for the gas nozzle. Instead, she walked towards the entrance of the garage where Sam was ostensibly organizing some tools. Her eyes met his across the dusty expanse. "I was told the Colonel's old engine has been making some noise," she said, her voice calm and even, yet carrying an undeniable weight of authority. Sam froze. The phrase was from the journal. It wasn't one of the standard walk-in codes. It was a priority phrase reserved for a handler-level contact in an emergency situation. His father had made a note beside it for Agent Parker only. He dropped the wrench he was holding with a loud clatter. He looked at the woman, then at Max, who stood watching her intently but did not growl. He simply observed as if recognizing a familiar presence. Sam made a decision. He trusted his father's protocol. He trusted his dog. Without a word, he gave the woman a short, sharp nod and gestured for her to follow him. He led her directly through the garage to the hidden panel on the back wall. He used the brass key, and the wall hissed open, revealing the elevator. The woman's expression remained neutral, but he saw a flicker of approval in her sharp eyes. They descended into the bunker in silence. When the doors opened, the woman took in the humming command center with a familiar ease. He kept the place in perfect order, as always, she said, a hint of warmth finally entering her voice. She turned to Sam, extending a hand. "My name is Agent Parker. I was your father's handler for the last 15 years of his career. More than that, Grant was my mentor and my friend." Sam shook her hand. Her grip was firm and steady. "They broke in last night," he said, getting straight to the point. "Two of them. Professionals." "We know," Agent Parker replied, her face grim. "We have been monitoring this station since your father's passing. We saw them. We were prepared to intervene if the threat escalated, but you and your partner handled the situation with remarkable efficiency." She gave a respectful nod toward Max, who was now sitting calmly at Sam's side. "My children sent them," Sam stated. It wasn't a question. Yes, she confirmed, and your suspicions are correct, Samuel. This is about far more than a piece of real estate. Your father was not just a passive keeper of this outpost. In his final years, he was running an active investigation. She walked to the main console and with a few deft keystrokes brought the main screen to life. A complex web of names, corporations, and offshore accounts appeared. Two faces were at the center of the web, Caleb and Isabel. Your son, Caleb, she began, her voice taking on a clinical tone, has been using his tech company as a front to sell restricted military-grade guidance systems and software on the black market. Your daughter Isabel has been using her international art gallery to launder the profits. They are key players in a very dangerous international arms trafficking network. Sam stared at the screen, a sick feeling twisting in his gut. It was worse than he could have imagined. His own family dealing in weapons. What were they looking for? He asked, his voice hoarse. Evidence, Agent Parker said simply. Your father was building a case against them. He compiled meticulous records of their transactions, their contacts, their entire operation. That evidence, we believe, is detailed in the journals he kept. She looked at him, her expression softening with something that looked like pity. There is more you need to know. This network they work with, they specialize. They don't just sell guns. They supply terrorist cells and insurgent groups with sophisticated components for improvised explosive devices. She typed another command and a new set of images appeared on the screen. Technical readouts, shipping manifests, and a high-resolution photo of a small silver object, a uniquely designed electronic trigger for a shaped charge. Sam's blood ran cold. The world around him seemed to must slow down the humming of the servers fading to a distant roar. He knew that trigger. He had seen it in a classified after-action report, a report he had read 100 times until the words blurred into an indictment of his own soul. He felt the question tear itself from his throat, a raw, ragged whisper. Kandahar province 2 years ago. Agent Parker's professional facade finally broke. Her eyes filled with a deep, profound sorrow. She gave a slow, solemn nod. The forensic analysis was conclusive. The IED components that killed Sergeant Ryan and the rest of his team were from a shipment that was facilitated and funded by your son's illegal sales. The truth was a physical blow. It knocked the air from his lungs, leaving him gasping. The grief he had tried to drown for years, the guilt that had eaten him alive, it all came rushing back, but now it was mutated, twisted into a monstrous new shape. It wasn't just war. It wasn't just bad luck. It was his family, his son's greed, his daughter's ambition. They had sold the weapon that had murdered his best friend. A wave of pure black rage washed over him, so powerful it made him tremble. He slammed his fist on the console, the pain a welcome distraction from the agony in his heart. He felt a wet nose press against his clenched fist. He looked down. Max was looking up at him, whining softly, his body pressed against Sam's leg. The dog could feel his pain, his rage. The storm inside him raged, and then just as quickly it subsided, leaving behind a core of diamond, hard, ice-cold purpose. The haunted, broken man was gone. The soldier was all that was left. He turned to face Agent Parker, his eyes clear and steady. Your father's evidence could bring down their entire operation, she said softly. He was preparing to hand it over to federal authorities before he passed. It is likely all in that journal you've been working on. Sam walked to the table where he had left the journal. He picked it up, its weight feeling different now. It was no longer just a mystery to be solved. It was a weapon waiting to be fired. This was no longer about protecting a legacy. It was about avenging his brother in arms. He looked Agent Parker straight in the eye. Tell me what you need. The bunker became the heart of their operation. For days, Sam and Agent Parker worked side by side, their collaboration a seamless blend of his intimate knowledge of his father's methods and her agency resources. They broke the final layers of the cipher, and the full extent of his children's treachery spilled out across the monitors. The journal was a meticulous ledger of death and greed, shipping manifests for restricted technology, coded names of contacts, and banking details for the offshore accounts where the blood money was hidden. It was the smoking gun. We're moving on them soon. Agent Parker said, her voice tight with focus as she uploaded the last of the decrypted data to a secure server. Our inquiries are shaking their network. They will know something is coming. Be on high alert. Sam didn't need the warning. He felt it in the air, a palpable tension, the feeling of a net drawing tight. He and Max had become inseparable, the dog, a constant reassuring presence in a world that had become dangerously unstable. Late one evening as they were finishing their work, Agent Parker turned to Sam, her professional demeanor softening slightly. "Your father told me about you, not just the official reports, but the real things. How proud he was of your service, how much he regretted the distance between you." Sam looked up surprised. "He never said anything to me." "He was a man of his generation," she said gently. "Showing emotion didn't come easily to him, but he kept track of your career every step of the way. He had a file, all your commendations, news clippings, mission reports he could access. He called you the better soldier." Sam felt a tightness in his throat. "I didn't know. He was especially moved when you took that teaching position at the Ranger School after your active duty. He said you were doing what he never could, passing on not just skills, but wisdom." "Why are you telling me this now?" Sam asked. Agent Parker's gaze was steady. "Because tomorrow everything changes. We're moving on your children's operation, and I wanted you to know who you're really fighting for. Not just for Ryan, not just for justice, but for a father who in his own broken way loved you very much." She stood to leave, but paused at the elevator. "One more thing, Samuel. This dog, Max, do you know why your father chose him specifically to be your companion?" Sam shook his head. "Max was part of a specialized K-9 unit in Afghanistan. He saved 13 soldiers from IEDs on his last tour, including one patrol that your father was particularly interested in, a unit that lost one man but would have lost everyone if not for this dog." She let that sink in before continuing. "Ryan's unit, Samuel, Max was there that day. He found 2 other devices before the one that took Ryan. Without him, you would have lost everyone, not just your friend." Sam looked at Max with new eyes, seeing not just a loyal companion, but a fellow soldier, a brother who had been there on the worst day of his life. "Your father brought him home when Max was retired. He said there was a symmetry to it. The dog that tried to save your friend would now help save you." With that, she stepped into the elevator, leaving Sam alone with a truth that was both devastating and strangely healing. He knelt beside Max, taking the dog's noble face in his hands, looking into those snowing eyes. "You were there," he whispered, his voice breaking. "You tried to save him." Max whined softly, licking Sam's face once. In that moment, their bond transcended mere companionship. They were survivors together, 2 warriors who had faced the same battle, carried the same scars. Sam held the dog close, feeling something break free inside him. Not the sharp pain of grief, but the slow, steady warmth of forgiveness. Forgiveness for Max, who couldn't save everyone. Forgiveness for himself, who had lived while others died. And perhaps someday, forgiveness for a father who had loved him in the only way he knew how. Outside, the Montana night wrapped around the old gas station like a blanket hiding its secrets from the world. But inside, in the warm glow of the bunker lights, a broken soldier and a retired war dog held each other, finding in that embrace a purpose stronger than vengeance, more enduring than rage. Justice was coming. But for now, this moment of understanding, of shared pain and mutual healing, was enough. The morning after Agent Parker revealed Max's connection to Ryan, Sam rose before dawn. Sleep had come in fits and starts, his mind churning with the revelations of the previous day. He made his way down to the bunker, Max padding silently beside him. The weight of what lay ahead settled on his shoulders as he began methodically preparing for the confrontation he knew was coming. Agent Parker arrived an hour later with her tactical team. 5 men and women with the quiet, watchful demeanor of seasoned operatives. They gathered around the central console where Sam had laid out detailed schematics of the area surrounding the gas station. "We need to be ready," Sam said, his voice steady. "My son isn't the type to give up easily. When he realizes how close we are to dismantling his operation, he'll make a move." Parker nodded, her expression grim. "Our analysts agree. The intel we've extracted from your father's journals has already allowed us to freeze 3 of their major accounts. They're feeling the pressure." One of the tactical officers, a lean man with close-cropped hair and who'd introduced himself simply as Wilson, pointed to the map. "We should establish a perimeter. These ridges here and here provide good vantage points for surveillance." "No," Sam said, shaking his head. "Too obvious. Caleb will be watching for that. He grew up hunting these hills with my father. He knows every approach. The memory surfaced unbidden. Caleb at 12 steady hands, holding his first rifle, eyes bright with concentration as his grandfather taught him to track and shoot. Sam had been deployed, then missing those moments that shaped his son. Another absence in a lifetime of them. "What do you suggest?" Parker asked, breaking into his thoughts. Sam pointed to the service station itself. "We make this the fortress. They'll come to us, and when they do, we'll be ready." For the next 3 hours, they developed a comprehensive defense strategy. Sam drew on decades of military experience mapping out fields of fire, establishing fallback positions, and identifying potential vulnerabilities. The tactical team was impressed by his thoroughness, his ability to anticipate and counter possible threats. "You haven't lost your edge, Vance," Wilson commented, a new respect in his eyes. "Some things you never forget," Sam replied quietly. As they worked, Sam found himself slipping back into the methodical mindset of a ranger planning an operation. The familiar rhythm of tactical preparation grounded him, pushing aside the turmoil of emotions that threatened to overwhelm him. This wasn't just about stopping criminals. This was his family, his children. The thought still sent a jagged pain through his chest. "One more thing," Sam said as they finalized their plans. "When this goes down, I want to be the one to confront them, face to face." Parker hesitated. "That's not protocol, Samuel. Your emotional connection is precisely why it has to be me," he interrupted. "They need to see the consequences of what they've done. Not just to Ryan, not just to the people their weapons have killed, but to our family, to everything their grandfather built." The agent studied him for a long moment, assessing. "This isn't about revenge." Sam looked down at Max, who sat alert at his feet, then back to Parker. "This is about justice and closure for all of us." After a moment, she nodded. "All right, but you'll wear a wire and we'll have overwatch at all times." They spent the afternoon wiring the station with discreet surveillance equipment. Cameras hidden in light fixtures, pressure sensors beneath the gravel drive, motion detectors positioned to cover every approach. By evening, the humble gas station had been transformed into one of the most sophisticated surveillance posts in Montana. As the tactical team departed to take up their positions in town, Agent Parker pulled Sam aside. "I've seen a lot of operators in my time," she said quietly. "But watching you today, it was like seeing your father again. The same precision, the same focus." Sam wasn't sure how to respond. For most of his life, comparisons to his father had felt like criticism highlighting the ways he'd failed to measure up. Now it felt different, like recognition of a shared purpose, a common code. "He never told me about his work," Sam said, "but somehow he was preparing me for this moment my entire life." Parker smiled faintly. "Grant always played the long game. Even now he's still 3 moves ahead." After she left, Sam walked the perimeter of the property, with Max checking security measures, testing sightlines, rehearsing scenarios in his mind. The dog matched his pace, alert and watchful, as if he too understood the gravity of what lay ahead. The sun set in a blaze of orange and purple, casting long shadows across the Montana landscape. Sam stood on the porch of the service station, watching darkness claim the land, a familiar sense of pre-mission tension coiling in his gut. "We've been here before, haven't we, Max?" he said softly, "waiting for the fight to come to us." Max pressed against his leg, a solid, reassuring presence. Sam knelt beside him, running his hand over the dog's thick fur, feeling the strong, steady beat of his heart. "Ryan would be proud of you," he whispered, "and I'm going to make sure he'd be proud of me too." For 2 days they waited. The service station operated normally, with Sam playing the role of the simple proprietor, selling gas and coffee to the occasional traveler. But beneath the surface, every moment was tense with anticipation. Every stranger scrutinized every vehicle approaching the station, analyzed for threats. On the morning of the third night, Agent Parker contacted Sam through the secure line they had established. "We've detected unusual activity in your children's accounts. Large cash withdrawals, charter flights booked. They're making preparations to flee." "They know we're closing in," Sam said, feeling a cold certainty settle in his bones. "They'll make their move soon. We've increased surveillance on all approaches to your location. Stay alert." The gambit came that afternoon. Sam was in the garage changing the oil in his truck, a simple grounding task. Max was lying just outside the open bay door, basking in the weak autumn sun, his watchful eyes surveying the empty road that stretched into the distance. Sam was under the truck when he heard a faint puffing sound, like a silenced air rifle. He dismissed it as the wind. A moment later, he heard the sound of a car speeding away down the highway. He slid out from under the truck, wiping his hands on a rag. "Mac," he called out, "time to come in." There was no response. The spot where the dog had been lying was empty. A cold dread, sharp and immediate, pierced through him. "Mac!" he yelled, his voice raw with sudden panic. He ran outside, scanning the empty property. Nothing. He circled the station, his heart pounding a frantic, desperate rhythm against his ribs. He was about to run back inside when a glint of metal in the tall grass by the road caught his eye. He knelt. It was a small, spent tranquilizer dart, a drop of a clear liquid still clinging to the needle. The world tilted on its axis. They had taken him. They had taken his... Before the rage could consume him, his phone rang. The caller ID was blocked. He answered, his hand clenching into a fist so tight his knuckles were white. "Hello, Dad." Caleb's voice was flat, devoid of emotion, a sterile and chilling sound. "I trust you have noticed your companion is missing." "Where is he?" Sam growled, his voice a low threat. "If you heard him..." "He is perfectly fine." Caleb interrupted, his tone bored. "For now, his continued health is dependent on you. You have in your possession our grandfather's journals, all of them. They are the only thing of value in that entire pathetic scrap heap. You will bring them to the old Oak Haven lumber mill. You have 1 hour." The lumber mill was a derelict property a few miles out of town, a skeleton of rotting wood and rusted metal. "Come alone," Caleb continued, his voice dropping to a venomous whisper. "No police, no one from the agency your father worked for. We will know if you are followed. If we see anyone else, the deal is off, and the dog will pay the price for your mistake. 1 hour, Dad." The line went dead. For a single white-hot moment, Sam was consumed by a blinding rage. He wanted to get in his truck and drive to that mill and tear his son apart with his bare hands. He wanted revenge for Ryan, for his father, and now for Max. But then the training kicked in. Rage was a liability. The mission was all that mattered. The mission was Max. He didn't get in his truck. He turned and ran for the garage, for the hidden elevator, for the bunker. He slammed his hand on the emergency contact button on the console, a direct line to Agent Parker. "He has the dog," Sam said the moment she answered, his voice tight and controlled. "Caleb has Max. He wants the journals, the old lumber mill, 1 hour." Agent Parker's response was immediate and professional. "Stay put. My team is 5 minutes out. We already have a drone en route to the mill. He won't see it." 20 minutes later, Agent Parker and her tactical team were in the bunker with him. On the main screen, a live thermal image from the drone showed 4 heat signatures inside the main building of the mill. 2 larger ones in the center that Sam recognized as Caleb and Isabel's distinct body shapes, and 2 others positioned near the walls, likely hired security. "This is a classic hostage exchange scenario," Parker said, studying the thermal imagery. "They've chosen their ground carefully. The mill offers them clear sight lines in all directions, single access road, elevated position. They think they've backed me into a corner," Sam said, his voice steady despite the storm raging inside him. "But they've made a critical mistake." "What's that?" Wilson asked. "They've given me a reason to come to them, before I was investigating. Now I'm retrieving one of my own." He looked around the room, his eyes hardening with resolve. "In Afghanistan, we had a saying, the most dangerous man in the room isn't the one with the biggest gun. It's the one with nothing left to lose." Parker studied him for a long moment. "What's your play?" Sam outlined his plan, drawing on decades of hostage recovery operations. It was straightforward but effective. Sam would appear to comply, entering alone with decoy journals, while Parker's team would move into position using the mill's structural weaknesses as cover. "Caleb expects me to be desperate emotional," Sam explained, "and part of me is. But he forgets what I was before I was his father. I was a ranger. I was trained for exactly this kind of mission." Wilson nodded approvingly. "Simple plan, minimal moving parts. That's usually the kind that works." They spent the next 20 minutes fine-tuning the details. Sam would wear a concealed wire and a locator beacon. The tactical team would deploy to pre-designated positions around the mill using the drone's thermal imaging to track movements inside. "Remember," Parker said as they geared up, "your objective is the asset, Max. We'll handle Caleb and Isabel." Sam nodded, though a part of him ached at the clinical terminology. His children were now targets hostiles to be handled. How had it come to this? Where had he gone wrong as a father? As if reading his thoughts, Parker placed a hand on his shoulder. This isn't on you, Samuel. They made their choices, adult choices with devastating consequences. I know, he said, but the words felt hollow. But they're still my children. And that's what makes you different from them, she replied softly. Even now, you still care. As Sam prepared to leave, she handed him a small earpiece. This will keep you connected to our tactical frequency. No matter what happens in there, you're not alone. He slipped the device into his ear, testing the connection. Copy that. Before departing, Sam returned to his apartment above the station. He opened the drawer of his bedside table and removed a small leather case. Inside was a medal, the Bronze Star with valor he had earned in his last deployment. He hadn't looked at it since the ceremony where it was awarded, too haunted by the memory of what they'd lost that day. He closed his fingers around it, feeling its weight, its significance. I'm coming for you, Max, he whispered. Just hold on, partner. The lumber mill stood on a low hill overlooking Oak Haven, a monument to a bygone era when timber had been the lifeblood of the region. Its weathered, clapboard walls were gray with age, windows broken or boarded over the once proud machinery, inside rusted and silent. The American flag that had once flown above the entrance was long gone, leaving only an empty flagpole pointing accusingly at the sky. Sam drove up the winding access road alone, a heavy briefcase on the passenger seat beside him. The afternoon sun slanted through the pines, casting dappled shadows across the hood of his truck. His mind was clear-focused in the way that had once made him an exceptional soldier, aware of every detail, every potential threat, yet utterly centered on the mission. He parked in the gravel lot before the main building and stepped out, scanning his surroundings with practiced ease. The place appeared deserted, but he could feel eyes on him, watching from the shadows of the broken windows above. I'm in position, he murmured, knowing the microphone concealed beneath his shirt would transmit his words to Parker's team. Copy that, her voice came through the earpiece, barely audible. We have visual on 4 targets inside the main structure. Third floor office appears to be their command post. The ascent is on the ground floor eastern corner. Sam adjusted the weight of the briefcase in his hand and walked toward the main entrance. The huge double doors, once designed to admit logging trucks, stood partially open, rusted hinges groaning in the light breeze. He slipped through the gap, entering the cavernous main floor of the mill. The interior was a cathedral of decay, smelling of sawdust and damp rot. Shafts of sunlight pierced through holes in the roof, illuminating swirling motes of dust. Ancient machinery loomed like sleeping beasts in the shadows. His boots echoed on the concrete floor as he walked deeper into the space. In the center of the room, illuminated by the harsh glare of a portable floodlight, stood Caleb and Isabel. 2 hired guards stood in the shadows behind them, hands resting casually on holstered weapons. And to the side in a large animal cage was Max. He was lying on his side, his movements groggy, but he lifted his head and whined when he saw Sam. The sight of his loyal companion imprisoned sent a surge of cold rage through Sam's veins, but he kept his face impassive. Years of military discipline allowed him to channel that anger, to transform it into clarity and purpose. The journals, Caleb said, gesturing to the briefcase, his voice echoing in the vast space. His eyes were hard, calculating all pretense of familial warmth abandoned. The dog first? Sam replied, his voice steady. That wasn't the deal. Isabel hissed, her elegant facade cracking to reveal the raw greed and fear beneath. She had lost weight since Samuel had last seen her, and dark circles shadowed her eyes. The pressure of their collapsing operation was taking its toll. If you want what's in this case, Sam said evenly, then I want to see that Max is unharmed. That's non-negotiable. Caleb studied him for a moment, then nodded to one of the guards who stepped forward and unlocked the cage. Max struggled to his feet, still affected by the tranquilizer, but his eyes were alert, fixed on Sam. There, Caleb said. Satisfied, now the journals. Sam took a slow step forward, his eyes locked on his son's face. Before we do this, I need to know why Caleb. Why the weapons? Why the IEDs? You had everything, money, success, a future. A flash of irritation crossed Caleb's features. Is this really the time for a heart-to-heart, Dad? I think I deserve an explanation. Sam insisted, buying time as he heard Parker's whispered updates in his ear. The team was in position, moving silently into the building. Caleb sighed, an expression of condescending impatience on his face. Fine. You want to know why? Because there was an opportunity and I took it. The military-industrial complex isn't just for the government, Dad. There's a whole world of buyers out there willing to pay premium prices for American innovation. You sold weapons to terrorists, Sam said, his voice hardening. People died. Americans died. It's just business, Caleb replied, spreading his hands. Supply and demand. The world is changing, Dad. Nation-states are becoming obsolete. Power belongs to those who control technology and capital, not those who wave flags and recite pledges. The coldness in his son's voice chilled Sam more than the Montana winter ever could. This wasn't the boy he'd taught to ride a bike to fish in the creek behind their house. This was a stranger wearing his son's face. And you, Isabel, Sam asked, turning to his daughter, is that how you see it too? Just business. Unlike Caleb, Isabel couldn't quite meet his eyes. The art world has always operated in gray areas, Dad. Money moves quietly through paintings and sculptures. I just expanded the network. You laundered blood money, Sam said quietly. Money paid for weapons that killed innocent people. That killed Ryan. A flicker of genuine shock passed over Isabel's face. What are you talking about? Who's Ryan? My friend, my brother in arms. The man who died because of an IED built with components your brother sold. Sam's voice remained steady, but his eyes burned with intensity. The man who would have married his girlfriend if he'd made it home. The man who will never have children, never grow old because of your business. Isabel paled, her gaze darting to Caleb, who maintained his impassive expression. I never knew. Enough, Caleb cut in sharply. The journal's Dad, now, or your precious dog gets another dose. A permanent one this time. Sam saw the true face of his son then. Not a businessman making hard decisions, but a cornered predator, dangerous and desperate. He thought of Ryan's easy laugh. He thought of his father's trust. He looked at Max, his loyal friend trapped in a cage because of this family's poison. Justice was for Ryan. The mission was for Max. All right, Sam said, his voice calm. He placed the briefcase on the floor and kicked it towards them. You have what you want. As Caleb bent down to open the case, Sam gave the signal, a quiet cough. But he did not wait. He moved. He exploded into action, not towards Caleb, but towards the guard closest to Max's cage. He moved with the brutal efficiency of a ranger, a whirlwind of controlled violence. He disarmed the guard in 2 swift moves, sending him crashing into a pile of old lumber. The second guard raised his weapon, but it was too late. From the shadowy rafters above, 2 figures from Parker's team descended on ropes, silent and fast. More agents stormed in from the entrances. It was over in seconds. Caleb and Isabel stood frozen in shock as they were surrounded. Federal agents, Parker's voice rang out through the mill. Weapons down, hands where we can see them. The hired security complied immediately, professionals who knew when a job was lost. Caleb slowly raised his hands, his face a mask of cold fury. Isabel seemed to collapse in on herself, all pretense of sophistication evaporating. As agents cuffed his son, Sam's and Caleb's eyes met across the room. Sam searched for some flicker of remorse, some recognition of the enormity of what he had done. He found none. There was only a cold, venomous hatred for the father who had beaten him. This isn't over, Caleb hissed. You have no idea who we're connected to, who will come for you. Sam held his gaze. I'm not afraid of the dark anymore, son. I've been living in it for years. He turned away, ignoring Caleb's continued threats. He walked to the cage and fumbled with the latch. He swung the door open. Max stumbled out, still groggy from the tranquilizer, and pressed his heavy head into Sam's chest, whining softly. Sam knelt, wrapping his arms around his friend, burying his face in his thick fur. I got you, boy, he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. I got you. He had made his choice. He hadn't pulled the trigger. He hadn't given in to the hate. He had completed the mission. He had saved his partner. And in doing so, he had finally truly saved himself. The aftermath of the raid on the lumber mill unfolded with the relentless momentum of an avalanche. Federal agents descended on Caleb's tech company headquarters in Isabel's gallery, simultaneously seizing computers, documents, and artwork suspected of being used in money laundering operations. Key associates were arrested in coordinated raids across 3 countries. Sam watched it unfold from the quiet sanctuary of the bunker, where Agent Parker kept him updated on the expanding investigation. The journal's his father's final testament proved to be the key that unlocked the entire criminal enterprise, providing names, dates, account numbers, and shipping manifests that formed an ironclad case. 3 weeks after the raid, Sam found himself sitting in a federal courthouse in Helena, listening as the prosecution presented its case against his children. The courtroom was austere with high ceilings and dark wood paneling that seemed to absorb both light and sound. Sam sat alone in the back row, an anonymous observer to the public, though the prosecuting attorneys nodded respectfully in his direction when they entered. Caleb and Isabel were brought in wearing prison jumpsuits, a jarring contrast to the expensive tailored clothing they had always favored. Isabel looked smaller, somehow diminished, her shoulders hunched against the weight of what was to come. Caleb maintained his arrogant posture, his eyes scanning the courtroom with calculating intensity. The evidence was overwhelming. Financial records, encrypted communications testimony from former employees turned state's witnesses, all painted a picture of a sophisticated operation that had moved millions of dollars worth of restricted technology to buyers around the world. The most damning testimony came from a military forensics expert who established the direct link between components sold by Caleb's company and the IED that had killed Ryan and 3 other American soldiers in Kandahar. As photographs of the deceased were displayed on the courtroom monitors, Sam closed his eyes, Ryan's face appearing in his mind, not as the grim crime scene photo, but as the laughing, vibrant man he had been. When he opened his eyes again, he found Isabel watching him, her face streaked with tears. She mouthed what looked like, "I'm sorry," but he couldn't be certain, and the moment passed as she was led away following the day's proceedings. Outside the courthouse, reporters clustered like vultures, shouting questions as Sam made his way to his truck. He said nothing, his face a stoic mask that revealed none of the turmoil beneath. Only when he was alone on the long drive back to Oak Haven did he allow himself to feel the full weight of what had happened. The collapse of his family, the vindication of his father's work, the strange, painful relief of truth finally exposed to light. Max waited for him at the service station, racing to greet him as he parked. In the weeks since the raid, the dog had become even more attuned to Sam's moods, offering silent comfort when the burden seemed too heavy to bear. "It's done, Max," Sam said as they walked together through the quiet evening. "They'll go to prison for a long time, justice for Ryan, I suppose, but it doesn't feel like victory." Max pressed against his leg, his warm presence a steady anchor in the storm of emotions. The news broke like a dam bursting. Headlines across the country screamed the story of the millionaire siblings, a tech mogul and a high society art dealer who were the masterminds behind an international arms trafficking ring. The stories highlighted the shocking source of the evidence, a meticulous investigation conducted by their own grandfather, the late decorated war hero, Colonel Grant Vance, a man who had apparently discovered his grandchildren's treachery in his final years. Sam avoided the news coverage when possible, but he couldn't escape the occasional glimpse of his family's dirty laundry being aired for public consumption. The narrative that emerged cast his father as a patriotic hero, his children as greedy traitors, and Sam himself as a redemptive figure, the broken veteran who had risen to the occasion to finish his father's work. The truth, as always, was more complicated. Justice, as Agent Parker had promised, was swift and absolute. Caleb and Isabel, along with their key associates, were convicted on multiple federal charges. Their assets were frozen, and their network was systematically dismantled. The threat was over. With the danger eliminated, the true weight of his inheritance settled upon Sam. Guided by his father's detailed financial records, and with the discreet assistance of Agent Parker and a team of trusted lawyers, he navigated the complex legal process of securing the $200 million fortune. For the first time, he was not just the guardian of a secret facility, but the steward of an immense power. The question that had haunted his father now haunted him. What to do with it all? The answer came to him, gradually taking shape during the long, quiet evenings he spent with Max, walking the perimeter of the service station, watching the Montana sunset paint the mountains in hues of gold and purple. He thought about the emptiness that had nearly consumed him after his discharge, the bottomless void that no amount of whiskey could fill. He thought about the countless veterans like himself lost in the silent, lonely war after the war. And he thought about Max, the sentinel who had stood guard over his soul and refused to let him fall. One evening as he sat on the porch with a cup of coffee, never whiskey, not anymore, he was surprised by a visit from Agent Parker. She arrived in an unmarked car, dressed in civilian clothes, looking more relaxed than he had ever seen her. "Just checking in," she said, accepting the coffee he offered. "The agency is winding down operations here. The bunker will be decommissioned next month." "What will happen to it?" Sam asked. "Standard procedure, stripped of sensitive equipment, sealed and forgotten." She studied him over the rim of her cup. "Unless you have other ideas." "I might," he admitted. "I've been thinking about my father's legacy, not the spy work, but the deeper mission, protecting people, saving lives." Parker nodded encouragingly. "Go on." "There are thousands of veterans out there struggling with what I went through. PTSD, substance abuse isolation. The traditional systems help some, but not all." He glanced at Max, who lay at his feet. "But I found something that worked for me." Parker said, understanding dawning in her eyes. "Not just any dog, a trained partner. Someone who understands the mission, who can read the terrain." Sam leaned forward, a new energy in his voice. "What if we could provide that for others, trained service dogs paired with veterans in need? A new mission for both of them." Over the next hour, the idea took shape between them. A foundation that would rescue and train dogs specifically to work with veterans suffering from PTSD and other combat-related issues. The bunker, with its secure facilities and isolated location, could be repurposed as a training center. The fortune his father had accumulated would fund it in perpetuity. "It's a lot to take on," Parker cautioned, "building something like this from scratch." "I'm not starting from scratch," Sam replied. "I've got 30 years of military experience, a perfect test case in Max and me, and a purpose that's crystal clear." He smiled, a rare sight that transformed his weathered face. "Besides, Rangers lead the way. It's what we do." Parker laughed, a warm, genuine sound. "Your father would approve, I think. Using his spy money to heal the wounds of war. There's a certain poetry to it." As she prepared to leave, she handed him a thick manila envelope. "Speaking of your father, we found this in the agency archives. His personal file on you. I thought you might want it." Later that night, alone in the apartment above the service station, Sam opened the envelope. Inside was a meticulously organized collection spanning decades. Newspaper clippings about his deployments, copies of commendation letters, photographs from military ceremonies. His entire career seen through his father's eyes. A handwritten note slipped from between the pages, dated just a month before the colonel's death. "Samuel has always been the better soldier, not because he follows orders more precisely or fights with greater skill, though he does both admirably. He is better because he has never lost sight of why we fight. Not for glory or power, but for the man next to you, for the promise of coming home, for the hope of healing what war breaks. If he finds this record someday, I hope he understands that my silence was not absence. It was the only protection I knew how to give." Sam read the words twice, then carefully folded the note and placed it in his wallet next to the faded photograph of Ryan. Some wounds might never fully heal, but understanding could be its own kind of peace. 6 months later, Sam sat in a bright modern office in the city, the kind of place he once would have felt completely out of place in. But he sat with a quiet confidence, his posture straight, his gaze clear and steady. The haunted look that had shadowed his eyes for so long was gone, replaced by a sense of purpose, of mission. Across from him sat Agent Parker, now retired from active service and serving as the Foundation's security director, and a silver-haired man in a sharp suit, the executor of his father's estate. On the table between them was a thick stack of documents. The Ryan Vance Foundation, the lawyer read from the charter document, a non-profit organization dedicated to the rehabilitation of veterans suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder through the training and placement of specialized service animals. Sam looked at Parker, who gave him a small, proud smile. He had spent weeks working with her to shape his vision into a reality. He thought of the countless veterans like himself lost in the silent, lonely war, after the war drowning their ghosts in whatever poison they could find. And he thought of Max the Sentinel, who had stood guard over his soul and refused to let him fall. "The Foundation will source dogs primarily from rescue shelters." Sam explained, his voice filled with a passion he hadn't known he possessed. "It will give them a new purpose, too. We will train them, and we will pair them with a veteran free of charge. We will give them a partner, a guardian, a reason to get up in the morning. He reached down his hand, settling on Max's head. I know the program works because I was its first success story. He picked up the pen and signed the documents. With the stroke of his pen, the Ryan Vance Foundation was born. His father's secret fortune, earned in the shadows of a hidden war, would now be used to bring soldiers back into the light. It was a legacy of healing, a tribute to the friend he had lost and the father he had found. Creating the foundation proved more challenging than Sam had anticipated. There were endless meetings with lawyers, architects, and dog training specialists. Building permits had to be obtained, staff hired, protocols established. Some days the administrative burden seemed overwhelming, threatening to bury the pure intent of his mission beneath layers of bureaucracy. On those days, Sam would drive out to the construction site where the foundation's main facility was taking shape on 100 acres of Montana ranch land not far from the service station. He would walk the grounds with Max, envisioning how each building, each training area would serve the veterans and dogs who would come here seeking a new start. The foundation's core staff came together gradually, a mix of veterans, dog trainers, and mental health professionals who shared Sam's vision. Many were skeptical at first, doubtful that a retired ranger with no formal qualifications in therapy or nonprofit management could create something of this magnitude. But Sam's military experience had taught him valuable lessons in leadership: when to delegate, when to stand firm, and above all, how to inspire others to give their best to a mission larger than themselves. Slowly, the skepticism gave way to respect, then to enthusiasm as the foundation took shape. The most challenging interview was with Dr. Emily Chen, a renowned psychiatrist specializing in combat-related PTSD. She arrived at the construction site one windy autumn day, her academic credentials impressive, her demeanor coolly professional. "I'll be direct, Mr. Vance," she said as they toured the half-built training facility. "Your concept is intriguing, but I'm concerned about the lack of clinical oversight. These veterans need professional therapeutic support, not just a dog and a pep talk." Sam nodded, appreciating her candor. "You're absolutely right, doctor. That's why we need someone like you on board. The dogs aren't the whole solution. They're a bridge. They create an opening when traditional therapy can't get through." He stopped walking, turning to face her directly. "I was lost for years after Afghanistan. Therapy, medications, support groups. I tried them all. But it wasn't until Max came into my life that I found a way back. He didn't fix me. He gave me a reason to fix myself." Dr. Chen studied him, her professional detachment softening slightly. "And you believe this approach can be standardized, replicated for others?" "With the right team, yes. The dogs provide something unique. Unconditional acceptance, immediate feedback, a living reminder to stay present. Combined with proper clinical support," he gestured to the building taking shape around them, "we could change lives." By the end of the tour, Dr. Chen had agreed to join as the foundation's clinical director, her expertise adding crucial credibility to the program. Through these months of building and planning, Sam continued his own healing journey. At Dr. Chen's insistence, he began attending a veteran support group in town, sharing his experiences for the first time with others who truly understood. It was difficult at first, breaking the habit of silence that military service had ingrained in him. But as he listened to others speak of nightmares similar to his own, of the same emptiness and alienation he had felt, something began to shift inside him. The shame that had clung to him since Ryan's death, the toxic belief that he was somehow unworthy of survival, began to loosen its grip. "Survivor's guilt isn't rational," Dr. Chen told him during one of their discussions, "but it's real. Acknowledging it is the first step toward managing it." "Managing," Sam repeated, "not curing." She smiled slightly. "Would you tell a veteran who lost a leg that they should expect to grow it back? Some wounds change us permanently. The goal isn't to erase them, but to learn to carry them with grace, to find meaning despite them, or sometimes because of them." Those words stayed with him, reshaping his understanding of what healing truly meant. Not a return to who he had been before Afghanistan, but a journey toward a new self, one that carried the scars of the past without being defined by them. Throughout this period of growth and change, Max remained his constant companion, his furry North Star. The dog seemed to instinctively understand when Sam needed space to process his emotions and when he needed the grounding presence of another living being. On the nights when the memories came too strong, when sleep eluded him, Max would press his warm body against Sam's side, his steady heartbeat a rhythmic reminder. You are here. You are safe. You are not alone. Spring had come to Montana, breathing life back into the cold land. The gas station at the edge of Oak Haven was no longer a tombstone. It had been reborn. The cracked concrete had been repaved. The rusted pumps had been replaced with modern ones, though Sam had insisted on keeping one vintage pump lovingly restored as a reminder of the station's history. The store had been renovated, its windows now sparkling clean, its shelves stocked with fresh goods, and a small welcoming coffee counter. The whole place hummed with a quiet potential energy. On a bright, warm afternoon, Sam stood out front with Max watching as two men carefully installed a new handcrafted wooden sign. The old faded letters of Vance's service station were gone forever. The new sign in elegant, deep green letters read, Grant and Ryan Memorial Rest Stop, and below that in smaller letters, Fuel Coffee, a place to rest. It was more than a new name, it was a declaration. It honored the disciplined, dutiful father who had held his lonely watch for 45 years. And it honored the laughing, brave friend whose memory was no longer a source of guilt, but a source of inspiration. As the workmen finished a minivan with out-of-state plates, the first official customer pulled in. A family spilled out, the children laughing as they pointed at the big, noble-looking dog sitting by the door. The father, a man about Sam's age, nodded at him. Nice-looking place you've got here, he said. Thank you, Sam replied, and the smile that reached his face was genuine and effortless. Welcome, BMO. Over the following months, the service station became a popular stop for travelers along the highway. Sam hired a small staff, including a young veteran named James Collins, one of the first participants in the Foundation's program. James had returned from Iraq with severe PTSD, his promising future derailed by the invisible wounds of war. His service dog Scout, a gentle black lab, rarely left his side. Together they managed the day-to-day operations of the station, allowing Sam to focus more of his attention on the rapidly expanding Foundation. The arrangement benefited them both. James gained stable employment and a sense of purpose, while Sam found a kindred spirit who understood the mission on a bone-deep level. The first full class of veterans and their canine partners graduated from the Foundation's program on a clear autumn day, almost exactly 1 year after Sam had signed the founding documents. 8 men and women, each paired with a bike specially trained to respond to their specific needs, stood proudly on the grounds of the new facility. Sam addressed them not with a formal speech, but with simple, heartfelt words about new beginnings and second chances. He spoke of the bond between soldier and service dog, not as a substitute for human connection, but as a bridge back to it, a first step on the long road home. As he watched them leave, each veteran walking tall beside their new partner, Sam felt a profound sense of accomplishment, unlike anything he had experienced in his military career. This wasn't about winning territory or defeating an enemy. It was about reclaiming lives that war had nearly destroyed, one heart at a time. Max, now showing touches of gray around his muzzle, sat beside him, as always, his presence a constant reminder of how far they had come together. We did good, boy, Sam said softly, scratching behind the dog's ears. We did good. Later that evening, as the stars began to appear in the vast Montana sky, Sam sat on the porch of the service station. The day's work was done, the station closed for the night. In the distance, the lights of the Foundation's facility glowed softly against the darkening landscape. He thought about the strange winding path that had brought him here. From the battlefields of distant lands to this quiet corner of America, from crushing grief to unexpected purpose. The station wasn't just a business. The Foundation wasn't just a charity. They were lifelines, bridges back to the world for men and women who had given everything for their country and found themselves adrift upon their return. In the distance, headlights appeared on the highway, travelers seeking rest, comfort, a moment of peace on their journey. Sam stood, Max rising beside him, ready to welcome them. The old soldier and his faithful companion standing watch together, guardians not of secrets anymore, but of something far more precious. The slow, steady healing of wounded warriors, the quiet triumph of finding purpose in pain, the enduring power of a legacy redeemed.